Question. If you picked a random person on the street and asked them what the most iconic Yu-Gi-Oh card is, what would it be? Well, given recent events, they might say Change of Heart, but weird ban list media news cycle aside, they'd probably say Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon. And really, who could blame them? If they're only passingly familiar with the franchise, anything with an Odd Eyes Pendulum Graph Dragon or Crystron Halka Fibrax is just gonna glance right off their perception. But the cultural ubiquity of original Yu-Gi-Oh back in the day has implanted Yugi and Kaiba's ace monsters into the zeitgeist of the larger culture. But if you asked a Yu-Gi-Oh player, well, there's a good chance they still might choose those two. In fact, I know that because I asked all of you on Twitter and the community tab here on YouTube, and wouldn't you know it, Dark Magician and Blue Eyes White Dragon easily came out as the top two. Oftentimes, they were cited together. And I'll be honest, that really threw me for a loop, because the answer I was expecting was barely even mentioned: the Egyptian gods. In the anime, they're presented as the most powerful threats ever created, not only in the game, but in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh itself, capable of striking down those deemed unworthy of their might. And on top of that, they're the key piece to discovering the Pharaoh's forbidden memories, making them integral to advancing the plot along with advancing the characters' game plans during duels. And their influence has rippled out across the rest of the game in a variety of ways. The sacred beasts draw heavy inspiration from them, majorly in their art direction and subtly in their effects. GX's entire dorm system is based around them, something that has been adopted by the wider community. Any OC in a red Letterman jacket is easily distinguished as a passionate underdog duelist who lets their heart lead their actions, a Slifer Red. And when Konami needed a mascot for their new starter decks to onboard players at a time there was no longer a currently running anime character to tie them to, they tapped Obelisk and Slifer for the job. And so, to wrap up Patron Week, I've been asked by this month's Quasar Commander to cover this oft-imitated but never duplicated series of cards. Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and it's time to explain the Egyptian gods. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our Duel Runners. Our next stop is 30k, where we'll have Jack Atlas Explained, which includes Resonators, Red Dragon Archfiend, and whatever other cards were used by the Master of Foster. We've also got our Discord, where I don't have anything funny to say at the moment about it. I just like this image and wanted to show it off. I'm also on Twitch, where you can join me for viewer duels and progression pools, and don't forget about my Patreon, where you can gain access to my videos early, reach some of these milestones, as well as helping to determine which explained videos I make. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with the Egyptian gods? Well, despite having wildly different effects and basically no synergy among them, they're all level 10 monsters, require 3 monsters as tributes for their normal summon, can't be normal set, their normal summons can't be negated, and nothing can respond to their normal summons, because who would dare upstage the arrival of the divine? Speaking of which, they're the only monsters in the game to be printed as Divine Attribute Divine Beast monsters. Nothing stopping other cards from becoming these by card effects though. In fact, Adignister uses this to their advantage when using the second effect of Dark Infant. Don't think too much about the name, trust me, it weirds me out too. But basically, its biggest link monster requires their material to have different attributes. And while you could puzzle out which attribute you wouldn't otherwise have on board and change Dark Infant to it, it's easier to just call Divine with its attribute changing effect and be done with it. So unless any of the Egyptian gods somehow become an integral part of that play sequence, you don't have to worry about it conflicting with any one of your other Adignisters. However, like I stated previously, the Egyptian gods have very little synergy with one another. Their high tribute cost means they're vying for your resources, but not in the way Link monsters do, where paying one cost usually triggers an effect that feeds into the next. For the gods, you're giving away real, actual cards to put them onto the field. So we're actually going to start by covering each Egyptian god individually, as well as their specific support, before moving on to cards that generically support all of them. And what better place to start off than with Slifer the Sky Dragon. They have question mark attack and defense, and gain 1000 attack and defense for each card in your hand. And if any number of monsters are normal or special summoned to your opponent's side of the field in attack position, that monster loses 2000 attack, then if its attack was reduced to 0 as a result, destroy it. However, if special summoned once per turn during the end phase, you send Slifer to the grave. Those who do not offer proper tribute do not get to wield the power of the Egyptian gods for very long. So these effects make Slifer something of a souped up King Tiger Wonghu, with the attack cap cranked all the way up to 2000 if they're summoned in attack position. And if they're not destroyed by it, then they keep a pretty hefty debuff. Which is just as well, because A, there's no way for Link monsters to avoid this, and B, they aren't exactly going to be able to leverage their attack stat if they're in defense position. It also has the potential to be incredibly powerful, as the bigger your hand gets, the bigger it gets. However, if we take a closer look, this is actually something of a hidden drawback. For Slifer to have anything approaching a stat line appropriate for their investment, you'll need to keep at least 3 cards in hand. That's 3 cards you aren't setting in your back row to spring on your opponent, a spell to advance your game plan, or a monster to bolster your battle lines. And any hand trap you use will have a kind of Appaloosa knock-on effect, reducing Slifer's power when used. But it's hard to deny just how cool this card is, because it ties power to one of the most powerful mechanics in the game: drawing cards. Every extra card you get is another 1000 points tacked on, and is so appealing that it convinced many people to play the continuous spell Infinite Cards, which removes your hand size limit, so they can make this card ginormous. However, despite the anime influence, none of this makes the card any better. Remember, if you play Infinite Cards, you are losing 1000 attack because it doesn't gain you cards all by itself. But until a real, competitive wave of support comes along, playing the God cards isn't about being cool, it's about having fun. And speaking of fun, it's trivia time! Slifer is kind of an odd name for an Egyptian god, especially next to Obelisk and Ra, right? Well, that's because its original name is the Sky Dragon of Osiris. The name was changed in reference to one of 4Kids Entertainment's co-producers for the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Roger Slifer. Yeah, it's not just a Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged Series joke. They actually had a very storied history in the comic book industry, working a number of jobs for both Marvel and DC, even co-creating Lobo. He'd later move on to work in animation, which would include working on Yu-Gi-Oh! Small world, ain't it? Now, another reason I wanted to start with Slifer the Sky Dragon is because it doesn't actually have very much specific support. In fact, there's currently only Thunder Force Attack, a quick play spell whose activation and effect can't be negated. If you control a monster whose original name is Slifer the Sky Dragon, you destroy as many face-up monsters your opponent controls as possible. And if you activated this during your main phase, you can apply the following effect: draw cards equal to the number of monsters destroyed by this effect and sent to your opponent's grave. Also, you can only attack with one monster this turn. That makes a lot of sense, considering resolving that could grant Slifer an enormous power boost. You don't want to pair him up with any other monsters to attack with. Blowing up one card would just be a 1-for-1 trade, so that's nothing special, but a full board of monsters, including the extra monster zone, could mean you net a +5 for 5000 more attack. Heck, just being a Raigeki for face-up monsters was good enough, and being at quick effect speed makes it interruption and removal as well to supplement Slifer's suppressive attack reduction effect. As far as signature attack spells go, we've seen a lot worse, so there's nobody out there who can steal Slifer's thunder. Okay, technically there are more cards that can support Slifer, but Thunder Speed Summon is much more face card knight support, and I've already got a whole video on that, so give it a watch if you want the deets on that. There's also Jam Breeding Machine, Revival Jam, and Jam Defender, but if they were never played together in the anime, you'd never associate them with each other, so we won't be including those in today's episode. Alright, let's move on to Obelisk the Tormentor. Like Slifer, if they're special summoned, they're sent to the grave during the end phase. Neither player can target this card with card effects, and they contribute 2 monsters to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, though this card can't declare an attack the turn this effect is activated. It's a shame you can't leverage its monumental attack power into a winning play after a board wipe, but that's early 2010s Yu-Gi-Oh! For you, I guess. Can't make the God cards too strong after all. Xyz monsters are just on the horizon. We don't want them being overshadowed by what would generally amount to a 5-card investment. Though, joking aside, it does have something the other God cards don't: targeting protection. Yeah, all that power, all the work you have to go through so they stick the landing, and compulsory evacuation can make Ra and Slifer disappear like that. Though that doesn't mean that Obelisk is some kind of immovable object. You can still Raigeki it and it'll go away. It's not like a towers or anything. But all my snide comments fall a little short because it's actually the second most competitive of all the Divine Beasts. When Frognarks were playable, Obelisk was teched in as a way to take advantage of the deck's vast swaths of tribute fodder. Not only was Obelisk a breeze to summon summoned at that point, but you could leverage those monsters into more board wipes. It wasn't taking the world by storm, but if you lacked a very specific out, then dueling against Obelisk was its own special brand of torment. Obelisk also has its own signature card, Fist of Fate, a quick play spell whose activation and effect can't be negated. If you control a monster whose original name is Obelisk the Tormentor, you negate the effects of an effect monster your opponent controls, and if you do, destroy it, and if you do that, for the rest of the turn, the effects of that monster are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. Then, if you activated this card during the main phase, you can apply this effect, destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls. Yowza, that is a lot. Basically, as long as the monster you want to get rid of can be affected by card effects, Obelisk just wipes it off the map. All protection is stripped away, it's destroyed, and any effect that would trigger because of that simply doesn't. And if that wasn't enough, it can also be a Harpy's Feather Duster if used during your main phase to keep you from being blown out by a mirror force or something. This is, without a doubt, the most thorough piece of removal I've ever seen, and I'm not looking forward to any future card that starts using this templating. It might seem out of the realm of possibility, but power creep is an inevitability in card games. In fact, you could say it's fated to happen. Soul Energy Max is a normal trap that you can activate if you control an Obelisk the Tormentor whose original attribute is Divine. You tribute 2 face-up monsters, except Obelisk, to destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, and if you do, inflict 4,000 points of damage to your opponent. During the main or battle phase, you can banish this card from your grave to add an Obelisk the Tormentor from your deck to your hand. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, you can normal summon an Obelisk the Tormentor. Now, this is what the Blue Bully's effect should have been all along, and I guess it kinda was, since Soul Energy Max is another signature attack card, this time referencing Obelisk's board wipe effect in the anime. The effect is very devastating, as dealing 4,000 damage before Obelisk swings in to take care of the rest is a quick way to close out the game. But its trapped card status means it's going to take a bit unless you find a way to activate it sooner. Though the fact that a Soul Energy Max in the grave can help put Obelisk on board without using your regular normal summon is a nice extra bit of utility, giving you the ability to maximize your resources. Magical Trick Mirror is a normal trap that you can activate when your opponent declares an attack. You target a spell in your opponent's grave and set it to your field. Also, you can banish this card from your grave and send a monster reborn from your hand or set on your field to the grave to special summon an Obelisk the Tormentor from your grave in defense position. And if you activated this effect during your opponent's turn, for the rest of the turn while you control the special summoned monster, all monsters your opponent controls must attack that monster if able. So I believe the intent is to steal an opponent's monster reborn if possible to fulfill the requirements for Magical Trick Mirror's effect, though if you've held onto your own monster reborn for this long, you can send that and keep whatever you stole from your opponent. And summoning Obelisk like this is pretty strong. If your opponent commits to a board of monsters that can't run over Obelisk, you can surprise them with a big summon, at which point they'll take a lot of damage from having to forcibly attack. Or you can use this on your turn. Even though it's summoned in defense position, you can still activate Fist of Fate, then use Obelisk for other plays. I hear sacrificing God is a pretty popular option nowadays. So, no matter whose turn it is, you'll always have a really neat trick up your sleeves. Now, before we head on to the last Egyptian god, I should bring up that Monster Reborn shows up on a lot of cards moving forward. Why is that? Well, you might not know it if you're only familiar with the TCG art, but original versions of Monster Reborn have an Ankh on them, a symbol of life in Egyptian culture. So if anything was going to be involved in reviving the Egyptian gods, it was gonna be this. Anyway, on to the only god that has multiple forms. Now, I actually already have a video talking about this god specifically, but it's all done by another character, it's all reverby, it's out of date, and I learned my lesson from Eldritch. The more I show them off on screen, the more you guys are gonna like them, and the more power they're gonna get. So, the first is the Winged Dragon of Ra. They can't be special summoned like their predecessors, and when normal summoned, you can pay life points so that you only have 100 left, and Ra gains attack and defense equal to the amount paid. You can also pay 1,000 life points to target a monster on the field and destroy it, and that effect is not once per turn, so you can pull the trigger on it as many times as you want. But since your other effect pays all your life points, you have to choose to either make a gargantuan monster, turning your life point lead into a victory, or you can bypass that and just spend life points to blast cards off the field for the benefit of your other monsters. I've gotta say, this card was ahead of its time. Give Ra a little more lenient summoning condition and they'd make a great piece of Dinomorphy attack. The first alternate form is something you may be familiar with, Sphere Mode, and it works pretty differently from the rest of the god cards we've covered. Like Ra, it can't be special summoned and it has question mark attack and defense, and like the other gods in general, it requires 3 monsters to tribute summon and can't be normal set. But you can use monsters from either player side of the field for the tribute, making it some kind of super kaiju, and control of it shifts back to the owner during the end phase of the next turn, a very clever reference to Mai's duel against Yami Merrick. Sphere Mode can't attack, nor can it be targeted for attacks or card effects, and you can tribute this card to special summon a Winged Dragon of Ra from your hand or deck, ignoring summoning conditions, and if you do, its attack and defense become 4,000. Now, this is probably the Egyptian god with the most tournament representation. The game has gone through a number of formats where building a big board you can't interact with has been the dominant strategy. Cards like Kaijus and Lava Golems do a good job of polymorphing big threats into vanilla dinguses, but when things get really bad, that's when people start thinking about Sphere Mode. It's a bit risky, as it not only takes up your normal summon, but also counts on your opponent having a field of 3 or more monsters, otherwise they'll get to keep the 1 or 2 very powerful ones. But if a 3+ field is being built reliably, then trading away your normal summon for Sphere Mode is a necessary evil. And while you just about never have to worry about your opponent tributing the egg for their own Ra, it is still viable link material for a lot of monsters, so don't expect to get this thing back. Heck, give it to the wrong opponent and you might end up with a Bakugan ball instead of Sphere Mode. Lastly, we have Immortal Phoenix. They're rocking 4,000 attack and defense, can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by its own effect. If a Winged Dragon of Ra is sent from the field to your grave while this card is in your grave, you can special summon this card, and cards and effects can't be activated in response to this effect's activation. Immortal Phoenix is unaffected by other cards' effects, and you can pay 1,000 life points to send a monster on the field to the grave, a far cry away from the base form's effect, as Phoenix doesn't target, nor does it destroy. And once per turn during the end phase, you can send this card to the grave, and if you do, you special summon a Sphere Mode from your hand, deck, or grave, ignoring summoning conditions. Because after spending the turn being a 4,000 attack and defense towers, you gotta take a little nap. This creates something of a loop, where Immortal Phoenix tags into Sphere Mode when it gets tired, which can then be awoken for base form Ra, granting it 4,000 attack and defense. If Ra is ever sent to the grave from that point, Immortal Phoenix takes over, and during the end phase, the whole cycle starts again. Death and rebirth, spiraling in on themselves over and over again, until you finally smash your opponent for game with a giant flaming chicken. And really, is there a more Yu-Gi-Oh way to win than that? I don't think so. Guardian Slime is a level 10 water aqua monster with 0 attack and defense, and if you take battle or effect damage, you can special summon this card from your hand. And during damage calculation, if this card battles an opponent's monster, as a quick effect, you can make this card gain defense equal to that opponent's monster's attack during the damage calculation only. And if this card is sent from the hand or field to the grave, you can add a spell or trap card from your deck to your hand that specifically lists the card the Winged Dragon of Ra in its text. So for all the spells and traps we're about to cover, this card can search them, while also acting as a blocker to keep your life points safe, which is doubly important with this theme considering, you know, it's Ra. So no matter what part of the Winged Dragon summon you need to put together, it's always a good time for some slime. Ancient Chant is a normal spell that adds a Winged Dragon of Ra from your deck or grave to your hand, and if you do, you can tribute summon a monster during your main phase this turn in addition to your normal summoner set. You can also banish this card from your grave, and if you tribute summon a Winged Dragon of Ra this turn, its attack and defense become the combined original attack and defense of the monsters tributed for its summon, giving it a kind of Nibiru flavoring. This also means you get the best of both worlds, a monster with a meaningful stat line that can also pick off a bunch of monsters. Though this does require you to tribute some substantially sized monsters, dinky little tokens won't give you power appropriate for one of the Egyptian gods. Or heck, just double dip. Take the stat gain from Ancient Chant as well as paying all your life points. The great beast in the sky doesn't have to hear me cry, it's an adult, it can do whatever it wants. Blaze Cannon is Ra's signature attack spell. It's a quick play spell whose activation and effect can't be negated. It also applies the following effects to one Winged Dragon of Ra you control until the end of the turn. It can't be affected by your opponent's card effects. When an attack is declared involving this card, you can tribute any number of monsters that have not declared an attack this turn to have Ra gain their original attack until the end of the turn, and after damage calculation, if this card attacked, you can send all monsters your opponent controls to the grave. Not destroy, send. Whew, that is a lot of impact. The attack gain effect is particularly nasty if you've summoned Ra using Sphere Mode, since it already has base 4000 attack, though it might not be necessary. If Blaze Cannon is already going to send all opposing monsters to the grave, you might as well just attack with them, though it is nice to have in case extenuating circumstances come up that prevent them from attacking. But the funniest thing about this card is that it's part of the Blaze Accelerator line of cards, making this technically volcanic support, and can be searched by Rocket. But why is that? Well, the OCG name for Blaze Accelerator is actually Blaze Cannon, which is the name for Ra's attack in the localization version of the anime and manga, which, to be fair, isn't far off from its original name, God Blaze Cannon. So I guess the moral of the story is be careful what you wish for, because while Blaze Cannon may not have been the volcanic support we needed, given the game's obsession with DM support, it's the volcanic support we deserved. Millennium Revelation is a continuous spell that allows you to send a Divine Beast monster from your hand to the grave to add a monster reborn from your deck or grave to your hand. You can also send this face-up card to the grave, and that turn, you can special summon the Winged Dragon of Ra from your grave with monster reborn, ignoring summoning conditions. However, it does make it so it must be sent to the grave during the end phase, like Slifer and Obelisk. So this card is pretty spiffy. Not only does it allow you to use more of the monster reborn reliant cards because of the spell's limited status, it also puts Ra in your grave so you can revive it with Revelation's effect. It also has the added benefit of helping put Immortal Phoenix into the grave, because that's the only place its revival effect will trigger from. It's a very neat card, but I don't think they finished localizing this. Like, the name and text are alright, but I can't make out anything in the art. I don't know hieroglyphics. Dark Spell Regeneration is a normal trap that works surprisingly similarly to Magical Trick Mirror. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can target a spell in your opponent's grave and set it to your field, and you can banish this card from your grave to send a monster reborn from your hand or set on your field to the grave to special summon a Winged Dragon of Ra from your grave, ignoring summoning conditions. Then, you can send a monster your opponent controls to the grave, also send that special summoned monster to the grave during the end phase. Once again, like with Slifer and Obelisk. So instead of making your opponent's attack Ra, it just removes a monster your opponent controls from the field. That's decent, and if nothing else, it's another way to get the Ra cycle online if you have Immortal Phoenix in grave. It also plugs up the plot hole of being able to special summon Ra, even though the card text says you can't. A wizard did it. Sun God Unification is a continuous trap that you can activate the turn it was set if you control a monster whose original name is the Winged Dragon of Ra. During the main phase, you can pay life points so you only have 100 left to have a special summoned Ra you control gain attack and defense equal to the life points paid, even if this card leaves the field. And once per turn, you contribute a Winged Dragon of Ra to gain life points equal to its attack. But you can't activate both effects of this card on the same chain. So this allows you to apply Ra's normal summon effect, known as the point-to-point transfer or one-turn kill technique, on a Ra you've special summoned through illicit means. And so you don't lose all those life points when it leaves the field via Millennium Revelation and Dark Spell Regeneration's lingering effect. You can tribute the Ra before it gets to that point to regain all those life points. Once again, it's a really funny move if you summon that Ra via Sphere Mode. It doesn't become in danger of leaving the field during the end phase, and starts out with 4000 attack, so it'll be a huge whopper. Tributing the Ra also triggers Immortal Phoenix, so you can attack with it, tribute it away to get back your life points, and then get the 4000 attack Phoenix. And during main phase 2, if your opponent is somehow still alive, you've got all of those tasty life points back to wipe out your opponent's monsters. And you'll be netting life points if you use the Sphere Mode version, which tacks an extra 4000 attack onto those Ra's you're tributing. God, this card is so cool. Alright, that's all the cards specifically for the Egyptian gods, but before we get into their general support, there's one more category we have to touch on. Remember how I said the god cards had counterparts in the sacred beasts? Well, as it turns out, you don't actually have to go as far as spin-offs to find monsters cribbing their style. Turn your eyes to the manga and you'll find the Wicked Gods, a series of dark god counterparts made by Maximilian Pegasus to keep the power of the Egyptian gods in check. However, because of their terrible power, they were never finished, but after Pegasus's gruesome death at the hands of Yami Bakura, Pegasus's adopted son Yako Tenma completed them, seeking to use their demonic power to revive his adoptive father and mentor. Dang, the Yu-Gi-Oh manga works very differently from the anime, huh? Of note, they're all level 10 Dark Fiend monsters, and none of them can be special summoned and can only be normal summoned or set by tributing 3 monsters. First we have the Wicked Eraser, Slifer's counterpart. They have question mark attack and defense, and gain 1000 attack and defense for each card your opponent controls, so the more established their field, the more deadly Eraser is. When this card is destroyed and sent to the grave, you destroy all cards on the field, and during your main phase, you can destroy this card. Being dependent on your opponent's setup is risky, but as a player, you do want to have as many cards on the field to leverage their effects as possible, so Eraser will easily have around 3000 attack at any given time, if not more. Then, when they're taken care of, the field explodes. Heck, you don't even have to wait for your opponent to do that, because Eraser comes with their own self-destruct button, which I thought was still banned. Can we get a judge over here about this? The Wicked Dreadroot is Obelisk's counterpart, sporting 4000 attack and defense, and while on the field, you have the attack and defense of all monsters on the field except itself. This ends up not super mattering when it comes to comparing your other monsters to your opponents, because they won't be able to get over ones they otherwise couldn't, because for some reason, this affects your own cards as well. But the amount of damage Dreadroot can do is greatly increased, and basically guarantees that nothing is getting over them. Okay, nothing reasonable can get over them, but if anyone records the Wicked vs Sacred Beast game and Armatael punches over the Wicked Dreadroot, you have to send me the recording, because that sounds beautiful. The Wicked Avatar is Ra's counterpart, having question mark attack and defense, and your opponent can't activate spells or traps until the end of their second turn after this card is normal summoned, and its attack and defense are always 100 points higher than the highest face-up attack monster's attack on the field, except itself. So you can't beat it by battle, and if you have any spells or trap cards, you're gonna have to wait on them, because Avatar is basically a mega cold wave. And that's all the attention that I'm giving to this giant sentient moon mirror shield, because it looks way too much like a Gantz ball, and I'm not really in the mood to join that particular death game, thank you very much. Okay, so that's the Wicked Gods out of the way. Now it's time for another big reason why I needed to add them into this episode, Divine Evolution. It's a normal spell whose activation and effects can't be negated, and you choose one of your monsters whose original type is Divine Beast, or whose original name is the Wicked Avatar, the Wicked Dreadroot, or the Wicked Eraser, except a monster already affected by Divine Evolution. It gains a 1000 attack and defense boost, its effect activations and its activated effects can't be negated, also it gains the following effect. When this card declares an attack, you can make your opponent send one monster they control to the grave, their choice. That's pretty menacing. Obelisk becomes even more ferocious, Slifer gains a baseline attack stat, and nothing can stop you from blowing up your own Eraser. Funny thing though, because it only keeps the activated effects from being negated, you can still shut off Dreadroot's stat having effect, and any of the attack modulating ones. The additional removal is pretty nice though. Despite everything else they get, piercing attacks just weren't on the menu. So having a way to remove monsters that can't be destroyed by battle is pretty useful. It also proves that evolution can exist in a religious worldview. Thank God Yugioh is here to answer all the tough theological questions of our era. Alright, back to our regular schedule of talking about the monsters before the spells and traps. First, let's cover Halakdi, the Creator of Light, a level 12 Divine Attribute Creator God type monster with question mark attack and defense. They can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned from the hand by tributing 3 monsters whose original names are Slifer the Sky Dragon, Obelisk the Tormentor, and the Winged Dragon of Ra. This card's special summon can't be negated, and the player that special summons this card wins the game. That's a lot of work, though there are a variety of ways of special summoning the gods, even Ra, so it's not impossible. I'm sure a studious combo player could find a way to make the game's only creator god type monster tick, or you could just overlay 2 of the gods for Gustav Max and make Liba, whichever floats your boat. Ra's Disciple is a level 4 light fairy monster with 1100 attack and 600 defense, and when summoned, you can special summon up to 2 Ra's Disciples from your hand and or deck. They cannot be tributed except for the tribute summon of Slifer, Obelisk, or Ra, and you can't special summon monsters while they're on the field, except by the effect of Ra's Disciple. So this is basically a tribute summon in a can for the Egyptian gods. If you can special summon 1 Disciple, you'll have your normal summon free for that tribute, and thankfully, their stats aren't that bad. If you tribute them for Ra after banishing Ancient Chant, Ra will hit the board as a 3300 attack, 1800 defense monster. Heck, Ancient Chant even searches Ra and gives you the extra tribute summon, so you can pull this off even if you normal summon a Ra's Disciple. Easy peasy. but they must be pretty steamed they have to share with Obelisk and Slifer. Why can't they get their own disciples? Reactor Slime is a level 4 Water Aqua monster with 500 attack and defense, and during your main phase you can activate this effect. You special summon 2 slime tokens, which are level 1 Water Aqua monsters with 500 attack and defense. Also, you can't normal or special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except Divine Beast monsters. And during the battle phase, as a quick effect, you can tribute this card to set a Metal Reflect Slime from your hand, deck, or grave, and it can be activated this turn. The design here is pretty clunky, owing to the fact that these effects are mutually exclusive. If you make the tokens, you can tribute Reactor to get Metal Reflect Slime, but A, 2 slime tokens aren't going to be enough to tribute a god, and B, Metal Reflect Slime is a level 10 Water Aqua Trap monster with 0 attack and 3000 defense that is decidedly not a Divine Beast, so even though it can be activated this turn, you won't be able to. And if you use the second effect to set Metal Reflect Slime, then you won't have Reactor Slime on board for its token spawning effect. However, instead of seeing this as a failure of card design, I think it's got 2 effects tailor-made to help with different lines of play. If you already have a way to turbo out your Egyptian god and just need the material, this card has you covered with all of the Reactor content you could ever want. But what does Metal Reflect Slime actually help us with? Well, it's an easy way to summon Egyptian God Slime, a level 10 Water Aqua Fusion monster with 3000 attack and defense, requiring an Aqua monster and a level 10 Water monster as material that must either first be fusion summoned or special summoned from the extra deck by tributing a level 10 Aqua monster with 0 attack, parameters that both Metal Reflect Slime and Guardian Slime fit into. Egyptian God Slime can be treated as either 1 or 3 tributes for the tribute summon of a monster, can't be destroyed by a battle, and your opponent cannot target your other monsters for attacks or card effects. So even outside an Egyptian God deck, this card is actually really good at keeping your other monsters safe, which is of particular help to us, as it provides Obelisk's targeting protection to our other monsters. Most importantly, your actual Egyptian God cards. Or you could use this card for their entire tribute. Or you can do both. Just use that nifty monster Reborn to bring back Egyptian God Slime, and voila! Honestly, I've got to find out what they're feeding those things. Every time I try to make my own slime, mine just end up like this. The True Name is a normal spell that has you declaring a card name, and on resolution, you excavate the top card of your deck, and if it's the declared card, you add it to your hand, then you can add to your hand or special summon a divine monster from your deck. Otherwise, you send it to the grave. I was obsessed with playing this card in Sylvans, because we are in desperate need of good excavation effects. Because you can stack your deck with little effort in that archetype, True Name could end up being an upstart goblin that can search you sphere mode, or if you had something on top of your deck you wanted to trigger, you could just call the wrong name on purpose. In a proper Egyptian God deck, you really are just gonna have to rely on the heart of the cards to get you through it. But hey, sometimes that works out for you. Trust me, I speak from experience. I will to the top of my deck. Skull Lair!
Watch it actually be Skull Lair this time.
Boom. Yo! Let's go! Soul Crossing is a quick play spell that you can activate during the main phase, and immediately after it resolves, you tribute summon a Divine Beast monster, and when you do, you can tribute monsters your opponent controls, even though you don't control them, but if you tribute summon this way, apply the following effect. Until the end of the next turn after this card resolves, you can only activate 1 card or effect per turn, not counting the effects of Divine Beast monsters. Oh, this card is a treat. Soul Crossing turns all of your god cards into quick effect sphere modes, and honestly, even with the 1 card effect restriction, this is really dope, especially because it only counts cards after Soul Crossing resolves, so you can play everything you want beforehand with no consequence. But be careful when you use this against combo decks that don't have easily identified choke points. You want to resolve this before they get any of their negation bodies, otherwise they'll just stop Soul Crossing, but you don't want to use it too soon where they can pivot to another line of play and still build a board while you're still locked to very specific effects. However, if you can master it, your opponent will think twice before crossing you. Mound of the Bound Creator is a field spell that keeps your level 10 or higher monsters on the field from being destroyed or targeted by card effects. Finally! And if a level 10 or higher monster on the field destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the grave, the player who controlled the destroyed monster takes 1000 damage. When this card is destroyed by a card effect and sent to the grave, you can add a divine monster from your deck to your hand. Good grief, this card is a breath of fresh air. I'd say that if your goal is to make a deck centered around the Egyptian gods, this card is a must to keep your investments safe. The burn damage is incidental but not unwelcome. I'm really just focused on the fact that your opponent now can't just hit raw with Book of Moon after you've given up all your life points. Trust me, over the course of several duels, this card is bound to be useful. Our last card is Ultimate Divine Beast, a continuous trap that you can activate when your opponent's monster declares an attack. You discard a spell or trap card, then target a Divine Beast monster in your grave and special summon it in defense position, then change the attack target to it. And during the end phase, if you control a Divine Beast monster, destroy all face-up cards your opponent controls that activated their effects this turn on the field. Thankfully, you can layer this so, even if your Egyptian god is set to go to the grave this turn, you can trigger Ultimate's effect first to blast all their activated cards. Now, while Slifer is on the art, I'd say Obelisk is the safer choice, as they'll have a guaranteed 4,000 defense. But once you pull it off once, your opponent's not going to fall for it again, which is another reason why attack triggers on face-up cards are so hard to get value from. Thankfully though, that's the worst I have to deal with. Slifer here is going to have to explain to Yugi that they broke the dark magic circle like that. And I'm not talking about a Tem, I'm talking Yugimoto. That guy's not loud, but they've got a disappointment face that reaches right into your soul and makes you hate yourself. Good luck, Slifer, you're gonna need it. Alright, so that's all the god cards, but what do we do with them? Well, aggro, mostly. We're not exactly swimming in sit around and accrue advantage type cards, so we have to end the game before our opponent drags it out. So what can we play to help them out? If you want to make the most out of the true name, try giving Card Advance a spin. It rearranges your top 5 cards as you see fit, and gives you an extra tribute summon. Perfect for assembling the god you need, along with getting a sweet draw. Angel 01 and Tellus, the little angel, were included in the Egyptian god deck, and for good reason. 01 can give you a little extra material as well as the extra tribute summon, and Tellus can make you 3 tokens ready for tributing. Using your opponent's monsters with Soul Crossing and Sphere Mode is great, but are there other methods? Sure. Crackdown not only steals monsters, but does so at quick effect speed to interrupt your opponent's plays, while Brain Control and the newly freed Change of Heart can give you temporary control. And by temporary, I mean it's only going to be alive temporarily because you're going to be tributing it away. As for a silly tech pick, give Yosenju's a try. No, really, they have a ton of normal summon chains to get all the tribute fodder you need, and with the help of double summon or ancient chant, you can tribute summon them afterwards. And in the case of Slifer, any future Yosenju's will bounce back to your hand, giving Slifer back all of their attack power. And that's all I have to say about the Egyptian gods. It's honestly wild that they haven't had some kind of Shining Victories style update that takes them to the top of the competitive ladder. But despite my polls, these cards are baked into the DNA of the franchise, and while the piecemeal support has been nice over the years, they deserve something stronger, something more impactful, something that will shake the dueling world to its very core. They deserve better treatment than this. They're not monsters, for crying out loud, they're gods! But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are the Egyptian gods primed for a retro revival, or are they still stuck trying to outdo Triamids? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashling Waltz, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Avagule, Adam Zagidel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Con Air, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Remti Bright, the Legendary Raven, and Too Much Desu, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to see another video where I talk about some of Yu-Gi-Oh's most iconic monsters, check out this video I made covering Elemental Heroes. And if you want to see two Yu-Gi-Tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenk and I's latest series, Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.